Welcome back to Sports Talk ATL. I am Chase Earl, joined by Jake Gordon and Alex Lord. Oregon goes into Utah this past weekend, absolutely smacks up on the Utes. All of the flaws that were, everyone knew about the Utes offense without Cam Rising at quarterback became very evident against Oregon's defense. And I looked at this game and I'm watching it and I'm just like, and then you watch Washington and Stanford. Stanford almost beat Washington. Arizona State almost beat Washington. And I think Washington's a good team, but obviously some of their flaws have shown ever since that win at Oregon. And I'm just wondering, and I know the game was at home, how the hell they beat Oregon, because Oregon looks like the one team in this conference that could actually stand up and not just make the college football playoff, but challenge the Georgias of the world, challenge the Michigans of the world, the Ohio States of the world. They look like a legitimate title contender, not just playoff contender. And obviously that game has a chance to be rematched at the end of the season on a neutral field. And I'm sitting here today and I have no idea how Michael Penix is going to have to pull out magic out of his butt for them to win that game.
Again. Again. Yeah, Oregon looks fantastic. I had this game on the side TV while I was watching Georgia, Florida, and I stopped paying attention very quickly. It was clear from the beginning that Oregon was in control of this game. And beating Utah at home, it's no small task. I don't care who they got at quarterback.
18 in a row.
I don't care if they got me or you at quarterback. Utah at home is a tough task. Kyle Whittingham's a fantastic coach, but Dan Lanning's just proving that he's probably the next great. I don't know if great necessarily yet, but that next guy who's going to enter that upper echelon of top college football coaches. If you ask me today, there's a short list of guys I'm taking over Dan Lanning. Kirby, Saban, Harbaugh. That might be it. I mean, he really has established himself. I think he's way better coach than Lincoln Riley. I would take him over Ryan Day personally. He's just got to win the big one. And if he can win a conference championship and go to the playoff, that is a massive success for how short of a time he's been at Oregon.
Yeah, he definitely did take over a dumpster fire that, Lincoln Riley did. But I do agree that I'd rather have Dan Lanning at the head of my program than Lincoln Riley. And that's because Dan Lanning gets it. Dan Lanning gets the fact that, you can't win games outscoring your opponent 80-79 every single week. And Oregon has built the most well-rounded team in the Pac-12. I have no idea how they lost to Washington. Probably shouldn't have. I've been all over Oregon. Bo Nix looks real. Their offense is very good. Their defense is the best in the Pac-12. I think it's better than Utah's. And they were just outclassed Utah on a X's and O's and a Joe's level. I mean, their guys were just bigger, faster, stronger. They looked like they had a better approach. They executed that plan. They just outclassed Utah at every level. And that's not to say Whittingham is just that inferior of a coach, because Whittingham is trying to make lemonade with bird crap. I mean, they got a backup quarterback. Like, they don't have anything on offense to really rest their hat on. They don't have a running game. They didn't have a running game, at least on Saturday. And, when you get in those third and medium, third and longs, you saw what Oregon's defense could do. And I think that this Oregon defense, as Chase mentioned, as Jake reiterated, I'm going to say again, they're a real national championship contender. And as I mentioned last week, I think that Bo Nix quietly played himself last week back into the Heisman race. Listen, he's not going to win, but a bid to New York is within reach for Bo Nix.
Yeah, and something else too, going back to USC, I said that they would drop a few of these games. They play Washington this week. They should have lost to Cal last week. They get Oregon on the 11th, and let me tell you, I will have that spread bankrolled, absolutely bankrolled.
I also don't think I'm not a huge Bo Nix guy. Listen, he's a great college quarterback. I'm not a huge Bo Nix guy in terms of the pro aspect of him. There's no doubt that he has the experience. He can run this offense. Like, he's been very good this year. But I actually don't think the Heisman, I'm just thinking about this out loud, right? Like, Oregon runs the table their rest of their schedule, which I've looked at their schedule. We talk about USC, but they should handle USC. And that could be a game where you got the national highlight. You're facing the former Heisman candidate, and you could easily throw for 600 yards against that defense. I mean, that could be a 600-yard, 6 TD kind of game. So that's a stat pad galore. Then you get the opportunity at the end of the year to rematch with Washington and Michael Penix, who's going to be right up there in the Heisman conversation. You go and outplay him. Jaden Daniels has a bad game against Alabama. I mean, why isn't Bo Nix the Heisman? Now, that's not something that I ever thought I'd be saying, but if you think about it like that, he's going to have a great game against USC. He has a great opportunity to beat Michael Penix at the end of the year in the hypothetical Pac-12 championship. And then, the only other guy I'm thinking about that he has to beat out is Jaden Daniels. And there are plenty of places with already 2 losses where Jaden Daniels could slip up, starting this week in Tuscaloosa, which we'll talk about later in the show. But he still's got to play Florida at home. He's still got to play Texas A&M. Those defenses are no slouches. He could easily lose any one of those games, and all of a sudden his Heisman campaign isn't nearly as sexy as it looks today. So I don't even think Bo Nix winning the Heisman is that far out of the realm of possibilities. If I had to put odds on it, I'd put him right there at number
Really
2
changing your tune from last week. I said he could make a statement this week with a 2-touchdown, 300-yard game. He didn't throw for 300 yards, but I said that, and you mocked me. You mocked me. Are you officially on the Bo Nix train? I mean, Oregon, Bo Nix, the Ducks.
I am on the Oregon Bo Nix train. I am on the train. I think they win the Pac-12. I think they're in the college football playoff, and I think Bo Nix has a very good chance of winning the Heisman. I hate to say it, but
say
it. It tastes like vinegar.
Yeah.
Let me be a homer just for a minute. But Carson Beck, three actually, Tennessee, 1 on the road, 3 ranked opponents in the row. I think he has a chance to insert himself at least into the conversation with.
Listen, I know what Chase is going to say, and I don't disagree with you, Jake. But generally speaking, the best team's quarterback is always going to have a shot to make it to New York. If he continues to put up numbers,
that was my point. Yeah.
Oh, he could make it to New York, but there's just so much ground he has to make up. I mean, Penix would have to flounder, Jaden Daniels would have to flounder, and
he would have to throw 6 touchdowns. He would have to throw 18 touchdowns in 3 weeks, something like that.
Yeah. And listen, against Ole Miss and against Missouri, I mean, he's got a perfect opportunity.
And Tennessee, I mean,
we mentioned the Ole Miss Missouri thing. Their offenses are great, and they are a different test for what Georgia's going to have to play, but their defenses are not great. I mean, you saw Jaden Daniels, and I know Jaden Daniels might be a little bit better than Carson Beck, but Carson Beck could easily throw for 4 or 5 touchdowns in that game. You saw him do the same thing against Ole Miss. And he's got both of those games at home. So if there was ever a stage for him to go out there and flex his muscles and be like, I belong in the conversation, those are the 2 games that you're going to do it. He's going to have the opportunities there.
Yeah, that was my only point. And like you said, there's not really a clear front runner at this point. And, the shine's kind of come off his teammate, Brock Bowers, because he's been injured. And so, maybe he'll step right in. That's how I like to do my preseason bets for Heisman quarterbacks, is I usually take the favorite, and then I will go with, just what quarterback's going to be in the playoffs. That's why I took Quinn Ewers, because I was like, Texas might make the playoffs. I even thought about J.J. McCarthy, who people are talking about as a Heisman candidate, which I just think is.
I tell you, who doesn't belong in this conversation is Marvin Harrison.
Harrison Jr.
I've seen this guy going 2 and 3.
Nobody,
800
no
yards
position players.
No.
I mean, dude, you have to have a 2,000-yard receiving year, and your quarterback has to be Mac Jones to win the Heisman as wide receiver. That's the only way. Because if Mac Jones was anybody else that year that Devontae Smith meant it, it was simply because he was Mac Jones, and no one really respected him. He didn't have the swagger of the Joe Burrow or a Carson Beck or a Jaden Daniels or something like that. Any other quarterback that had a little more love wins that Heisman over Devontae Smith. There was just something about Mac. Yeah, there was just something about Mac Jones that people didn't love, because the guy threw for 50 touchdowns in 11 games, and somehow they're it's just because of his receivers. And I was like, well, you could say that about Joe Burrow. You had Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson. I mean, all these guys that are having these fantastic years are going to be loaded with stacked teams that have great receivers. I mean, you could argue Jamar Chase's year before Devontae Smith was better than Devontae Smith's, but no one even had that conversation that Jamar Chase was going to be in the Heisman, because why would you take that from Joe Burrow? It was just the swagger and all of that stuff, which does matter. I mean, that's going to matter in the voters. And we got to cut this off because I want to talk a lot of college football. I don't know where we want to start.
Let's talk about next week. Huge slate.
Let's start in Tuscaloosa. Let's start in Tuscaloosa next week.